It was the most unexpected entry on the Supreme Court's docket in a decade. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs that defied the typical solemnity of its marbled walls. Lining the back rows were journalists, policy wonks, professors, law clerks, and a handful of stunned Hollywood agents who still couldn't believe the headline, Denzel Washington, to argue before SCOTUS. The case, Washington versus United States, wasn't a publicity stunt, despite what skeptics and tabloids had claimed. It was a serious challenge to the federal government's use of AI-based surveillance protocols on minority communities, technology that had flagged innocent citizens for watch lists based on flawed data models. Denzel wasn't playing a lawyer in a movie. He was one, recently barred in New York after 3 years of clandestine study under legal mentors who initially laughed off his interest but quickly learned better. Sitting at the respondents' table, Denzel was calm, his hands folded, eyes unwavering as the justices filed in. Justice Gorsuch gave a polite nod. Ketanji Brown Jackson looked at him with open curiosity. Roberts, however, wore a smirk that signaled open skepticism. "Mr. Washington," Roberts began once the preliminary procedures ended, "I suppose we should first clarify for the record. Are you here as an attorney or as an actor auditioning for the role of one?" The room stiffened. Denzel rose slowly, unshaken. "Your Honor, if I may, I've portrayed roles from corrupt cops to revolutionary leaders, but none of those required bar admission. He lifted his credentials and placed them before. "The clerk does." Roberts didn't blink. "Of course. And did you write your brief, or did a screenwriter help?" Another ripple of awkward laughter danced around the chamber. Denzel tilted his head. "I wrote it, Your Honor, and just to be clear, the Constitution wasn't written in final draft either." The clash was immediate. Denzel launched into his opening statement with a gravitas that fused courtroom command with the cadence of a man who'd spent his life mastering words. "This is not about celebrity," he said. "It's about the rights of people you'll never see in this chamber. People flagged, tracked, harassed because an algorithm made by defense contractors said their zip code or skin color made them a risk." Roberts interjected, voice cool. "You're asking us to question the legitimacy of predictive policing models designed by professionals in national security, Mr. Washington. Are you proposing courts micromanage intelligence agencies?" Denzel stepped forward. "I'm proposing constitutional oversight. These tools have bypassed probable cause under the guise of national interest. The Fourth Amendment wasn't suspended just because we added AI to the equation." Justice Alito leaned in. "But the Patriot Act does not grant carte blanche to spy on civilians," Denzel snapped, then added, more measured, "and even it has provisions requiring judicial review. This program has none." Roberts rested his chin on one hand, scrutinizing him. "You seem passionate, Mr. Washington, but passion doesn't win cases. Law does." Denzel smiled tightly. "Then let's talk law. Carpenter v. United States, 2018. This court ruled that historical cell site location information constitutes a search under the Fourth Amendment. You authored the majority opinion, Your Honor. So how does mass metadata collection under AI surveillance not violate the same precedent?" A flicker crossed Roberts's face. "That case involved personal data. These models assess aggregated risk." Denzel's voice rose. "Aggregated or not, the output targets individuals, real people, real consequences. What's the difference between a human judge issuing a warrant and a machine silently branding someone a threat with no oversight?" For the first time, silence fell in the courtroom, not out of reverence, but tension. Roberts leaned back in his chair and drummed his fingers along the bench, his smirk gone, replaced by something darker, calculated. "Very well," he said, retrieving a folder from under his bench. "Let's test the foundations of your argument." He stood, an unorthodox move for a Chief Justice during argument, and held the folder aloft. Mr. Washington, in your written submission, you cited Jones versus United States, Carpenter, and Katz, all of which hinge on reasonable expectation of privacy. But what of Terry versus Ohio? Denzel didn't hesitate. Terry permits stop and frisk based on reasonable suspicion. But reasonable suspicion requires articulable facts, not code that even its creators admit can't be explained. It's the black box problem. We don't know why the system flags someone. Roberts moved forward, now fully engaged in what had become a duel. But you use technology every day, Mr. Washington. Facial recognition on your phone, predictive, apps in your industry. You trust those algorithms. Why is this different? Denzel shot back. Because I choose to use them. I opt in. No one opts into being put on a terror watch list based on the clothes they wore to a mosque or their attendance at a political rally. Roberts frowned. So you're drawing the line at consent? No, Denzel answered. I'm drawing the line at accountability. If the system can't explain why it targets someone, it shouldn't be used. Full stop. The chamber was thick with a rising tide of pressure, one part ideological clash, one part philosophical rupture. Justice Sotomayor leaned in. Are you suggesting we ban the use of AI and surveillance outright? I'm suggesting, Denzel said, locking eyes with Roberts, that before we allow machines to brand citizens' threats, we at least subject them to the same legal scrutiny we demand of humans. If a cop needs probable cause, so should an algorithm. Otherwise, we're not preserving justice. We're automating oppression. Roberts took a beat. Then, slowly, he returned to his chair. Let's talk about your qualifications, Mr. Washington. I must admit the court is intrigued. Tell us, how did you go from film to federal litigation? It was the first moment Roberts's tone softened, but not out of deference. It was a probe, a calculated play to frame Denzel as a curiosity, an anomaly. Denzel smiled, faint but real. 3 years ago, I read a story about a teenager in Newark wrongly flagged by predictive software. No charges, but it destroyed his life. I called a friend, Professor Charles Alston, Constitutional Law, Columbia. He laughed, thought I was joking, until I showed up in his class every week. No press, no cameras, just questions. One class became 2, then 4. I took the LSAT, quietly enrolled. Passed the bar, no shortcuts, just sweat and silence. Justice Barrett looked surprised. Why keep it hidden? Denzel's voice turned quiet. Because the moment people know who you are, they stop listening to what you're saying. I didn't want a courtroom built on fandom. I wanted one built on facts. The gravity of that answer weighed heavy. For the first time, even Roberts paused. Not in dismissal, but reflection. So this case isn't about you, he said slowly. It's about them. It's always been about them, Denzel said. My face gets me through the door. But I'm here so the next kid from Newark won't need a movie star to stand up for his rights. Roberts looked down at the papers on his bench. For a long time, he said nothing. Then quietly, we'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. He banged the gavel softly. Session adjourned. Denzel turned, his team behind him, and as he walked past the rows of spectators, no one said a word. They didn't need to. A storm had been set loose in the heart of power, and the eye of it walked calmly toward the exit.